Impact Teams Radio. Welcome to Impact Teams Radio, the show where we explore what it takes to be a leader of the leaders in corporate America. Get ready to be inspired and discover proven tips for going from average to exceptional. Now, here's your host and guide, Tony Sherman.
Hello, and this is Tony Sherman from Impact Teams Radio, and today we have a return guest. A guest who had some very important and impactful information from my perspective last time he came here. Dennis, welcome back.
Well, thank you very much for having me back. Appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Now, you mentioned very, very briefly in your bio in the last episode that you were the CEO of I Am Safe. Could you tell us a little bit more about what is I Am Safe?
Absolutely. I Am Safe started probably about 15 years ago. And really started as a result of, I had an incident on a New York City subway where I was actually held at knife point by an attacker and was able to use some techniques, verbal defense techniques that were extremely effective in stopping that individual, and actually had him turn around and walk off of the subway saying, "I'm sorry, sir, for bothering you." And most people don't know how to do that. And I really stayed away from a lot of that for a number of years. And when we started I Am Safe, we started to look at armed self-defense. And that was kind of the way that the organization started. And as we started to put up our website, things started to happen. We began to receive contacts from a number of organizations asking us to come in and talk a little bit about ways of preventing violence. And coincidentally, we had been really doing the same type of work where we were starting to look at it and saying, you know, sometimes armed defense is not the way to go. There has to be other ways of handling potentially dangerous situations by learning how to disengage. And we started thinking about it. I have a master's degree in communications from New York University. When I came out of school, I thought I knew a lot in terms of how to handle and deal with people. But I started to recognize that early on that what you learn in school is maybe really doesn't apply in the real world. And let me give you an example. For example, when we went through school, all of us, whether it's grammar school or high school or college, we took a number of courses, and nowhere in that academic education at any level did any of us ever take a course on how to deal with difficult people. And yet every day we deal with difficult people. It might be at home, it might be at work, it might be a mugger on the street, it might be anyone that you interact with. So we started to build a program all around the concept of dealing with difficult people. And that's really where that started. We took it a little bit further. We recognized that women often are the targets of domestic abuse, bullying, and we said, you know, really if we start to concentrate our focus on women's personal safety, that was really an important area. And if you take a look and you see the number of women who are impacted either indirectly or directly by domestic abuse, intimate partner abuse, domestic violence, dating abuse, we said here was a real need within the market. So that's how we started I Am Safe and have just taken it through now over the last several years.
And it seems to make sense to me to, especially if your target is helping women to be safe, to have the non-physical approach, if you can do that effectively.
We do. One of the things I think, you know, women many times will rely on a protector, and we kind of think of a husband possibly being a protector. Well, many people make the assumption that the police are here to protect me. And yet the United States Supreme Court, on a number of occasions, has indicated that police departments are not really there to protect you. They are there to investigate crime. So, for example, if you are assaulted or if your home is broken into, you can't sue your police department because they didn't protect you. So women really needed to have an understanding of a number of things, which was, how do I de-escalate a situation? And women have a tremendous advantage because they are highly intuitive. They see things differently. They listen differently than men do. They pay attention. And they're picking up on subtle details. So what we like to do is say to women, use those strengths to really maximize how you interact and how you can disengage and take control of a situation. And actually women have really some pretty significant advantages when it comes to things like deflecting violence, to disengage from violence, or to redirect through some different ways.
So can you give our female listeners some tips or techniques of what they can do in a corporate workplace environment when they feel unsafe? And I know that's nebulous, but I wanted to leave it open to let you pick the way that you want to approach that question.
Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, I think if you're in a corporate environment, we always have the over-aggressive manager that HR loves. And when you complain to HR about this manager being a little bit too demanding or being a bully, the reaction typically is one of, well, you've probably never worked for a really great manager before. So what we suggest to people is that, number one, you want to document anything that you're involved in. Number two, if you are confronting or being confronted by an individual, we typically have two reactions. The first normal reaction we have is to go quiet because we don't want to say anything, we don't want to embarrass anyone, we don't want to, in effect, make our position known. The second thing that we tend to do, or another approach that we take, is that we go back at the individual with the same amount of velocity that they projected upon us. And really what we're saying is that neither one of those work. So if you remain silent, that encourages the bully, the corporate bully, or a difficult situation. If you strike back, then you become an uncooperative employee. So what we suggest that you do is do something that is totally counterintuitive. And by counterintuitive, what we're saying is you need to actually gain physical control over yourself. And the way we suggest doing that is if you're in a confrontation, the first thing you want to do is go silent, because that's a triggering device for you to say, I need to react differently. I don't want to overreact. I don't want to underreact. What I want to do right now is go silent, and I want to listen. And there's a big difference between listening and hearing. And when I say to people, what is the opposite of speaking? Everyone says listening. But the problem is that's not really what people do. The opposite of speaking for most people is waiting for an opportunity to make a point. So rather than listening, what most people do, and I think the statistics say 95% of people don't pay attention because they're waiting for the other individual to pause so they can make a point. And as a result, communication breaks down. So the first thing is go silent, actually pay attention and listen to what the other person is saying, understand what they're saying, and the third part of that is then feed back to the individual what you thought you heard. So it might go something like, okay, I've heard what you're saying. Let me make sure I understand. Is this what you meant? Then play it back. The key is never to parrot back exactly the same phrase as someone else used, because that's considered to be impolite, if you will, or parroting, and it won't get you anywhere. But listen to the meaning of what they're saying, and then try to go back at it. And the key with all of this is really a key word called empathy. If you have empathy for another individual, it really works very effectively in communicating back to someone.
So if you're feeling bullied or oppressed or just basically verbally cornered in an office by what's going on, you've basically got a three-step process. Go silent, and that should be an internal trigger for you to not react, but to respond. In that space, you then listen, and what you're trying to do is to hear the intention. And once you think you've got the intention, I say, so, Dennis, here's what I think I heard you say, and then I restructure that in my words.
That's correct. And if somebody is upset, you might say to them, you seem to be upset. Is there anything I can do to help you? Now, that's counterintuitive because our reaction many times is to put up that front right back with an individual. You don't want to do that. I see you're upset. Is there something wrong? Is there any way I can be of some assistance to you? We tell the story many times in many of our workshops of an individual who comes into your store, and it's a retail store, and they're rolling in a tire. And they're rolling in a tire, and this is a woman's dress shop or a men's clothing store. And the person says, your policy is the customer is always right. I want my money back. This tire doesn't work. Well, there's two reactions. One reaction is to look at them and say, you don't you know where you bought that? Get out of here. We don't sell tires here. That's down the street. That's one approach. And you've taken control of the situation and you've made the person uncomfortable. On the other side of it, if the person rolls the tire in, we say, think about it differently. If the person is saying to you, this tire is a problem, how do I handle it? What I would say at that particular point is, I'm sorry to hear that, or ma'am, I'm sorry to hear that you're having a problem. What seems to be the problem? And the person explains what is going on. At that point, you might want to say, if I bought a tire at that kind of money and it happened to me, I would be upset with that too. Maybe we can help you here a little bit. There's a store down the street that sells tires. Maybe, would you mind if my assistant manager walked down with you to the store? Maybe we could get that tire in the right place for you? It's a totally different way of handling a problem. In other words, you handle the problem by helping the other person, even when they are verbally aggressive towards you. And it's a process that's totally counterintuitive.
So I can see that process working for somebody who's angry for a reason, and the reason can be just inside their own head. I'm not saying it's justified. But angry people, I can see that can work. But what do you do when it's more insidious, when the person has a bullying nature? And part of what they're trying to do to this woman in a corporate environment is to dominate. And not necessarily overtly aggressively, because that could lead to a HR issue. But they want to bully, they want to demean, they want to put someone down. How do you handle that when you're on the receiving end of that?
What you need to do in that particular case is bring them up short, and you bring them up short a couple of ways. If someone is saying something aggressive to you, say, wait a minute, did you really mean to say that to me? Did I understand that you really meant that? And what happens in that kind of a situation is the person many times will pull back and say, well, no, I didn't quite mean that. Let's talk to some other people about this. And again, what you want to do is the same thing if you're being stalked. If you're being stalked by a predator or a former partner that you were with, what you want to do is many women, for example, will try to do that by themselves. And what we say is don't do that. Rally everyone around you. Document what's going on. Explain what's going on. You can't be in an isolated situation. And what happens with most people in a corporate environment is I don't want to lose my job. I don't want to say anything. I'll just do this, and eventually it'll get better. And the idea here is you don't want to do that. You want to go right back in a polite, factual way and saying, is this what you meant to say? Do I really understand this? Are you telling me that I'm not performing to level? Couldn't we please document that? I'm not understanding. And then do the same thing with other people around you. Gather people around you, document it, and then also you're in a better position to talk to HR. If not to HR, then senior management.
As soon as you said it, it just resonated with me. Did you really mean that? I mean, then you're holding someone accountable for their aggression. And if they say yes, then say, well, I am totally at a loss here. Let me pull Fred or Jim or Sheila in, and then let me reflect to them what I think I heard you say, and you tell, and if they understand, then I'm missing the point. But that's fantastic because it brings accountability in and it brings witnesses in. That is so powerful.
Well, the thing, when you think about it, when you're dealing with what we often refer to as criminal activity of some type, criminals have a couple of fears. They don't want to get caught. They don't want to get hurt. They don't want to get sick. And the same thing with a bully or a stalker. They don't want to get caught. So what you want to do is catch them. You want to flip the light on, throw the light on them of visibility, and they're saying, gee, this is not working. This person is not responding. In any situation where there's bullying, you want to go back at that bully, but you want to go back in a logical, very systematic way of taking that situation under control.
Yeah, I can see you've got a whole technique and approach here, because the one thing I need is a bully, and this is my fundamental need, other than, as you said, not to get caught. But what I really need is a victim. And what you've basically done is you've laid out a framework for the person that I choose to bully to say, okay, don't be a victim. And you either don't be a victim because you stand up for yourself in the structured manner you just said, or if I'm struggling because Tony's too effective a bully, then you bring other people in, because bullies hate crowds.
That is absolutely true. And we say the same thing with predators. If you're being approached by a predator or stalked, you become the predator. And as soon as you do that, what predators don't want is another predator, and you set yourself up the same way. Bullies don't pick on strong people. They pick on people they think they can intimidate. And once they see that intimidation doesn't work, the game is over.
Absolutely, because at best you've caught them, but at worst they'll go find someone else.
Correct.
But the other thing is, then at that point, I'm like, because once I know someone who leans towards that, and I've known people in my career who lean towards that, then it's nice, because then once you've taken the power off them, they never get it back, and you can.
That's right, they never do.
you can lend it to someone else when you see them start to lean into someone. You think, oh, they're the new victim. You walk by their desk and you say, are you okay? Is there anything I can do to help you? And of course, then the bully moves on.
Exactly.
Yeah. You're right.
Eventually what you do is you isolate the bully.
And then they either have to produce decent work or move to another environment.
Well, exactly. I think, too, we talk about bullying at work, but one of the things, too, that is the significant importance, I think, is travel safety. And I'd like to bring that up because what happens right now, we have so many women in the workplace who are taking positions that formerly were held by men. They're going through areas like sales and marketing. They're traveling, they're on the road. And one of the things that we really like to focus on is women's personal safety when traveling. And so many women many times are preparing emotionally or physically for, an assault by a stranger. And one of the things we point out, and I think you're aware of the new book we have coming out, which is What to Know, Do, and Say to Be Safe, A Woman's Guide to Personal Safety. What we talk in there is that 90% of the problems that women face with personal safety and security are areas that are not addressed, what women don't think about. They don't think about, for example, internet safety. They don't think about travel safety. They don't think about how do you react to a home invasion or some of the things that you can do to prevent or react to actual workplace violence. Today, you're more apt to be involved in incidents like that than you are typically for being assaulted by some stranger, grabbed on the street. And, the karate studios and judo studios are filled with women who are taking those kinds of classes, and it's great exercise. But that's only a small portion, about 10% of attacks that occur with women. So when they're traveling, that's when it occurs. When they're in the workplace, it occurs. When you're at play, those are the areas where you least expect it, and that's generally where women have problems or difficulties.
And in fact, yes, because if I'm totally focused on keeping myself safe from the 10%, then the 90% threat doesn't get the appropriate focus. Let me put it that way.
Absolutely, you're absolutely 100% correct.
So, okay, we are running out of time, and I definitely had a note to ask you for some more details on the book, because what we've discussed, we went into a deep dive into one significant area in the workplace, but you've just opened a can of worms where there's a lot of subtlety and complexities with female safety. So I assume you cover a lot more scenarios in the book.
We do. It's actually 16 chapters in the particular book. We talk about internet safety. We talk about internet partner abuse, how to identify a potential person who might be someone who might be subject to domestic violence. We talk about how do you handle a carjacking, how do you deal with difficult people, which we talked about. We talk about the whole concept of embracing fear, what fear is, how to handle it, how to embrace it, and how to overcome fear in some new ways. And one of the most important things we talk about in the book is the ability to build what we call an experience library. And that experience library is all about how to use your mind as one of the most powerful tools you can have to protect yourself. And you think about it, your mind and the ability to think through, to recognize problems, is a tool that it can never be taken away from you. It's your best self-defense tool. It can't be taken away at an airport. You can take it anywhere in the world, and it can get you out of problems and difficulties. And about 90% of the time, that tool alone can help you. And we go into great detail in the book on that particular situation. If you've got a minute, I can tell you, for example, we had a young woman who came to one of our workshops. She was going to be traveling down to Haiti at the particular point in time, and she was concerned about earthquakes. And we taught her a couple of things about how to react to potential violent situations or an earthquake. And what happened is she was checking into the hotel. As she was checking into the hotel, she felt a rumble, and she exercised what we call a trigger reaction, which we cover in the book. And a trigger reaction is one of those things that you don't think about, you immediately do it. And sure enough, she instantly, as soon as she felt the tremor, she ran out of the hotel. People would turn around and looked at her and kind of were, laughing at her. She stood out in the street, and within minutes, the entire hotel collapsed. She was the only survivor.
Oh, I was just about to say awesome, but obviously for everyone else it wasn't. But that's a huge value, just to learn those psychological techniques and find a way to inculcate them in your life.
Absolutely, and that is the key with this whole approach, where we try to say these are things you're not aware of, practice them. The experience library basically is built on every experience you have goes into that library, and it's a library of your mind. If you go into a regular library, it's, a fiction section, a child section, but the library of your mind is one that puts fact and fiction and everything into one library. And when you're facing a difficulty, when you're facing a challenge, your mind goes back and says, what do I do here? And if you have an instantaneous answer or prepared, you're much better, you're much further ahead than if you're not. I'll give you another example. Most people who are involved, for example, if you're involved in a plane crash, the plane goes down, it's landed on the ground, and you're standing there and nothing has happened. I mean, the passengers are all sitting inside of the plane. Most people will sit in the plane and say, thank God nothing happened. It takes 90 seconds for the flames to burn through the fuselage. If you're in that situation, a trigger reaction that we try to teach is, if you're involved in that kind of reaction, you want to be out of that plane in seconds. You absolutely want to be out of there. And then we also talk about, and if you're female, you shouldn't be dressed in high heels or a tight skirt because that's going to impede your ability to get out of that plane. So all of the safety training that we do and personal safety training is all about how these things all interlink to save your life, to put you ahead of the curve, and to keep you and your family safe.
That's amazing. Okay, so the obvious thing for any lady listening to this podcast is get a copy of the book. So how do we buy this book?
It'll be available August 1st on Amazon, and all you need to do is go on Amazon, and again, the name of the book is What to Know, Do, and Say to Be Safe, A Woman's Guide to Personal Safety, and you can get the book right through Amazon.
And I know this will sound silly, but because you work with a team, are you the author of it, or is there a team authorship?
Actually, it's a team author. I worked with my daughter, whose name is Jennifer Launick, and Jennifer worked with me on the book. And Jennifer, coincidentally, had spent a number of years in the travel industry and is extremely familiar with the dangers and many of the things women face, from automobile safety, travel safety, all the way through.
Okay, so Jennifer and you are the authors.
That's correct.
On
we also brought in we have a guest author in there by the name of Patrick Gray, who's a former FBI agent who is in charge of Internet security and safety, personal safety, and has contributed a whole chapter in there about the dangers women face on the Internet.
Wow, you have some serious authority going in that book as well. Well, seriously, not just authority, experience.
We hope so.
I am amazed at how fast the time has gone. Dennis, we have to close here, but thank you very much. And for the listeners, I will put the book title and the authors on the show notes for this episode, and this episode will be up before August 1st so that we can make sure that we can get the book. Dennis, thank you so much for your time and information.
And thank you for having me on the air. Thank you.
Okay, and until next week, this is Tony Sherman from Impact Teams Radio.
That's it for this week. Thank you for listening. Now go and apply these few gems. Make the wisdom you have heard your own. If you want to be part of our launch success, then please go to impactteamsradio.com/love and tell the world. If you want more and never want to miss a beat, please go to impactteamsradio.com/subscribe. If you have 3 minutes, we would love to see a positive review on iTunes. And until next time, remember to act on what you've learned, and you'll be ahead of most of the world. Impact Teams Radio.